Chronic inflammation is often viewed through the narrow lens of autoimmune conditions or injuries, but its role in metabolic health, particularly in weight gain and obesity, is far more significant than many realize. While popular narratives tend to fixate on food alone as the cause of weight gain, there's a growing body of evidence showing that persistent, low-grade inflammation acts as a hidden driver of fat accumulation, hormonal disruption, and insulin resistance. In other words, you can eat a relatively balanced diet, avoid overeating, and still struggle with weight gain if your body is constantly inflamed. The source of this chronic inflammation is rarely just diet. It often stems from a complex interplay of modern stressors: poor sleep, emotional strain, environmental toxins, ultra-processed foods, sedentary behavior, and even polluted air. Unlike acute inflammation, the body's short-term defense mechanism in response to injury or infection, chronic inflammation simmers silently, damaging tissues, altering metabolism, and reshaping how the body stores and uses energy. One of the key mechanisms through which inflammation contributes to obesity is its effect on insulin signaling. In a healthy state, insulin helps shuttle glucose from the bloodstream into cells to be used as energy. But inflammatory molecules, particularly cytokines like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6, interfere with this process. They blunt the effectiveness of insulin, forcing the pancreas to produce more to get the same effect. This insulin resistance doesn't just affect blood sugar, it also promotes fat storage, particularly around the abdomen, and makes it harder to burn existing fat reserves. Even a modest caloric intake can lead to weight gain under these conditions because the body is metabolically stuck. Stress is a particularly potent inflammatory trigger, and unfortunately, it's embedded into the fabric of modern life. Chronic stress elevates cortisol, a hormone that, when persistently high, alters appetite, promotes cravings, especially for calorie-dense, sugary foods, and encourages fat storage around vital organs. What's alarming is that this physiological cascade can occur even without binge eating. Emotional stress alone, especially when coupled with inadequate sleep and limited movement, can push the body toward an inflammatory, fat-retentive state. Sleep deprivation further compounds this issue. Poor sleep quality disrupts circadian rhythms and reduces the body's ability to regulate inflammatory responses. It increases the production of inflammatory cytokines and reduces the body's resilience to stress. Hormonal imbalances from lack of sleep, particularly increased ghrelin, hunger hormone, and decreased leptin, satiety hormone, further drive food cravings and reduce the ability to stop eating when full. Thus, even if a person tries to maintain a healthy diet, their internal signals are working against them due to inflammation-induced disruption. Environmental factors add another invisible layer. Exposure to pollution, especially fine particulate matter from traffic, factories, or even indoor air pollution, is increasingly linked to systemic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. The body perceives these particles as threats, activating immune responses that, over time, lead to oxidative stress and inflammatory signaling that disrupt fat metabolism. Studies in urban populations have consistently shown a correlation between air pollution exposure and increased risk of obesity, even after adjusting for diet and exercise levels. There's also the inflammatory burden from ultra-processed foods, not simply due to their calorie content, but because of additives, preservatives, refined oils, and emulsifiers that may irritate the gut lining, promote dysbiosis, imbalance in gut bacteria, and trigger immune responses. When the gut is inflamed, its barrier function weakens, allowing microbial fragments, like lipopolysaccharides, to enter the bloodstream, a process known as metabolic endotoxemia. This silently fuels systemic inflammation, reduces insulin sensitivity, and encourages fat storage. What makes chronic inflammation so dangerous is how quietly it operates. It doesn't cause immediate pain or visible symptoms, so people often blame themselves or their willpower when their body resists weight loss, unaware that a hidden inflammatory state is sabotaging their efforts. It's not just about calories in versus calories out anymore. It's about whether the internal environment is supportive or hostile to metabolic health. There's hope, however. The inflammatory load can be reduced, not just with anti-inflammatory foods, but by rethinking the way we live. Prioritizing restorative sleep, managing stress through mindfulness, reducing exposure to environmental toxins like plastics, pollutants, and processed foods, staying active throughout the day, and healing the gut microbiome can all help lower chronic inflammation. Even small, consistent changes, such as spending time in green spaces, practicing deep breathing, limiting screen time before bed, or choosing organic produce when possible, can shift the body out of a defensive inflammatory state and into a more metabolically responsive one. In summary, chronic inflammation is a powerful but often invisible force that can drive weight gain even in the absence of overeating or bad food choices. It distorts the body's hunger cues, fat storage mechanisms, and insulin sensitivity, creating a metabolic environment primed for weight accumulation. Blaming food alone ignores this deeper biological disruption. To truly address obesity, we must look beyond the plate and examine the total ecosystem of stress, sleep, pollution, and internal balance. Without this broader view, the real root causes remain hidden, and progress remains elusive.